Wu Zetian, The Dragon Empress Part 1, The Forbidden Throne. In the chronicles of China's vast imperial past, stretching across more than 2,000 years, only one woman ever dared to seize the title of emperor. Her name was Wu Zetian. To some, she was a monster, a usurper drenched in blood, who stopped at nothing to secure her throne. To others, she was a visionary, a reformer who guided her empire into prosperity, who opened doors for women and left behind monuments that still defy time. But who was Wu Zetian really? A tyrant cloaked in silk, or a misunderstood genius far ahead of her age? The story begins not in glory, but in obscurity. Born in the year 624, Wu entered the Tang imperial court at the tender age of 13. She was merely one among hundreds of concubines serving Emperor Taizong, a child in a palace of giants. Yet, even in those shadowed corridors, the young Wu displayed a rare spark. Sharp-witted, graceful, and ambitious, she knew that survival in the Forbidden City demanded more than beauty. It required cunning. Her rise was improbable, almost impossible. Most concubines faded into silence, their names swallowed by the vast machinery of the empire. But Wu was different. Where others bowed and yielded, she studied, she listened, she waited. She understood the invisible threads of power. How alliances were formed, how whispers could topple queens, how weakness could be turned into opportunity. And so from the margins, she began to climb. History, however, does not remember her ascent as a gentle one. Dark tales circulate, tales whispered for centuries, that Wu killed her own infant daughter, framing the sitting empress for the crime so that she might replace her. That rivals who dared oppose her were mutilated in grotesque fashion. Their limbs severed, their bodies drowned in wine. Whether these stories were fact, slander, or both, they have clung to Wu Zetian's image like shadows that will not die. Even her family was not safe. Chronicles claim she forced her own son into exile, only to compel him to commit suicide by poison. For those who hated her, Wu was the embodiment of ruthless ambition, a woman willing to sacrifice blood itself for the throne. But is that the whole truth? New discoveries, etched in the dust of forgotten tombs and the glitter of buried treasures, paint another picture. Archaeologists uncover murals of foreign envoys bowing at her court, testimony to China's reach as a global superpower during her reign. They unearth crowns fashioned from jewels of distant lands, India, Persia, even the Mediterranean, evidence of a cosmopolitan empire at the height of its wealth. They reveal temples and pagodas raised to the heavens, monuments of faith and grandeur that still dominate the skyline of Xi'an. These finds suggest that Wu's rule was not one of collapse, but of flourishing. That she was not only feared, but respected. That she did not simply cling to power, but wielded it to transform her world. And yet, the contradictions remain. The ancient Confucian historians, determined to erase her, portrayed her as a calamity. Later dynasties dismantled the tombs of her allies, tore down the memory of female power, and cursed her legacy with stories of cruelty. But the silence carved on her own tombstone tells a different story still. Unlike every other emperor, Wu Zetian left her stela blank. No grand inscriptions, no eternal boast, just an empty stone, daring history to decide for itself. What kind of ruler leaves her epitaph unwritten? Was it humility, defiance, or the confidence of someone who knew that her deeds would echo long after ink had faded? This is the paradox of Wu Zetian, a woman who shattered the order of her age, rising from the lowest rank of concubine to claim the forbidden throne of China. She was both the dragon and the shadow, the empress and the enigma. In this series, we will step into her world. The blood-stained corridors of the Tang Palace, the glittering markets of Qianling, the soaring towers of Buddhist pagodas, the whispered conspiracies of court and cloister. We will walk the line between legend and truth, between tyranny and vision. Because to understand Wu Zetian is not only to glimpse the story of one woman, it is to confront a question that still haunts us. In a world built for men, what price must a woman pay to rule as emperor? Part 2. The Rise of the Concubine. The year was 637. In the sprawling Tang Dynasty, the imperial palace stood as both a beacon of majesty and a cage of shadows. Within its towering walls lived hundreds of women, concubines, servants, entertainers, each bound by silken threads of ambition, jealousy, and survival. Among them was a 13-year-old girl named Bu Zhao. She was not born into imperial glory. Her father, Wu Shiwa, was a relatively minor official, and though her family enjoyed some wealth, they did not possess the pedigree of the great clans. Wu entered the harem of Emperor Taizong not as a princess or noble bride, but as a low-ranking concubine. To most, such a position promised obscurity. Few would ever be noticed, fewer still remembered. But Wu Zhao was not destined for silence. The court of Emperor Taizong. Emperor Taizong of Tang was no ordinary ruler. He had risen to power through war, seizing the throne from the chaos of the Sui collapse. Under his hand, the Tang Dynasty flourished, expanding its borders, securing its administration, and solidifying itself as one of the mightiest empires the world had ever seen. His harem, however, was a world apart, a labyrinth of rivalry where beauty was currency and favor was life itself. Wu Zhao, even as a teenager, understood this game. She possessed more than beauty. She had wit, charm, and an almost dangerous awareness of her surroundings. She learned poetry, music, calligraphy, the arts that could please an emperor. But more importantly, she learned people. Their weaknesses, their desires, the quiet leverage hidden in every word and gesture. It was here that Wu began to refine the weapons she would one day wield. Patience, observation, and the unflinching will to endure. A spark in the shadows. At court, Wu Zhao caught Taizong's eye not through flamboyance, but through subtlety. Chronicles suggest she became one of his favored concubines, skilled not only in the arts of companionship but in conversation. She listened as few dared to, offering insights that revealed a sharp and curious mind. Though still young, Wu displayed ambition. She accompanied Taizong on hunts, rode horses, and engaged in discussions typically reserved for men. The emperor, intrigued, kept her close. Yet Taizong's health declined. In 649 he died, leaving behind a vast empire and a young concubine with no protector. Tradition dictated that when an emperor died, his concubines were to retreat to Buddhist convents, living out their days in ritual and silence. Wu Zhao was sent to a nunnery, her hair shorn, her silks replaced by simple robes. Many believed her story ended there, erased from the annals of power. But destiny had other plans. Return to the palace. When Emperor Taizong's son, Gaozong, ascended the throne, the empire shifted again. Gaozong was not his father. He was frail, plagued by illness, and often overshadowed by stronger personalities. His empress, Wang, dominated the court, while powerful clans vied for influence. It was in this fragile environment that Wu Zhao re-emerged. Gaozong, having once noticed her in his father's harem, encountered her again during a temple visit. Struck by her beauty and poise, he summoned her back to court, breaking precedent, reviving a concubine who should have remained cloistered forever. The decision shocked many. To recall a former concubine of one emperor and install her as consort to his successor was scandalous. Yet Gaozong was captivated, and Wu seized the opportunity with both hands. The web of ambition. Within the palace, rivalry burned hotter than ever. Empress Wang, though officially supreme, found herself threatened by Wu Zhao's growing influence. Another consort, the formidable consort Xiao, also held sway. Wu Zhao understood that to survive, she must outmaneuver both. It was here that legend and history blur. The most infamous tale tells of Wu Zhao's infant daughter. According to the chronicles, when the child died suddenly, Wu accused Empress Wang of murder, ensuring her downfall. Some accounts even whisper that Wu herself killed her child to frame the empress. Whether true or slander, the result was the same. Empress Wang was deposed, consort Xiao was disgraced, and Wu Zhao rose to the rank of Empress Consort in 655. From the ashes of scandal, she emerged triumphant. The Empress Ascendant. As Empress, Wu Zhao proved far more than a mere ornament to the throne. Gaozong's weakness left a void at the center of power, and Wu filled it with precision. She advised him on policy, influenced appointments, and gradually assumed control of state affairs. Her enemies whispered of cruelty. Some claimed she ordered the limbs of her rivals severed, their bodies submerged in vats of wine. Others accused her of driving opponents to suicide, orchestrating purges to consolidate her authority. These tales, whether exaggerated or not, forged an image of ruthless determination. Yet her reign was not built on terror alone. Wu was intelligent, pragmatic, and strategic. She promoted capable officials from outside the great aristocratic families, undermining the entrenched nobility. She aligned herself with Buddhism, sponsoring temples and rituals that reinforced her divine right to rule. For the common people, Wu's policies brought relief: tax reforms, granaries to store grain against famine, and opportunities for scholars of humble birth to rise through examinations. The making of an emperor. By the 660s, Gaozong's health had further declined. He suffered strokes, leaving him debilitated. Wu Zhao stepped into the vacuum fully, issuing decrees in his name, presiding over court and commanding the empire's vast machinery. Ministers addressed her with reverence, knowing that she was the true power behind the dragon throne. The rise of a woman to such prominence was unprecedented, and the resistance was fierce. Confucian scholars railed against her as a disruption of cosmic order, a violation of the natural hierarchy. To them, a woman could guide the household, but never the empire. Wu Zhao disagreed. In 660, she effectively became regent, though the title remained hidden in Gaozong's shadow. By 683, when Gaozong died, she had already laid the foundation for her ultimate ascent. Acting as Dowager Empress, she ruled on behalf of her sons, but in truth, she ruled for herself. And in 690, she would take the final, forbidden step, declaring herself emperor, not Empress Dowager, not consort, but the sole sovereign of China. Legacy of the ascent. The path was carved in blood and brilliance. Wu Zhao, once a forgotten concubine, had outmaneuvered queens, broken centuries of tradition, and reshaped the destiny of an empire. To some, her rise was proof of demonic ambition. To others, it was evidence of genius. What cannot be denied is this: she had done what no woman before or after her would ever achieve. From the dim corridors of the Tang Palace, from the silence of the convent, from the ashes of scandal and the whispers of fear, Wu Zetian rose. And in her rise, she changed history forever. From the shadows of the convent to the glitter of the dragon throne, Wu Zetian's ascent was only the beginning. But how would she transform ambition into absolute power? Stay with us as the story unfolds. And if you wish to uncover more truths history tried to bury, remember to subscribe to Obscure Truths. Part 3: The Dragon Throne. In the year 690, history shattered. On an autumn morning, banners of crimson and gold rippled over the palace at Luoyang. The drums of ceremony thundered, echoing across the courtyards. Ministers, generals, and nobles gathered in solemn procession, bowing low until their foreheads touched the marble steps. A woman emerged from behind the vermilion doors, not as a consort, not as a regent, but as the new son of heaven. Wu Zetian declared herself Emperor of China. It was an act that defied more than 1,000 years of tradition, a gesture that overturned the cosmic order enshrined by Confucian law. For centuries, men alone had borne the mandate of heaven. Yet here, before the stunned eyes of her court, stood a woman who seized that mandate for herself. She renamed the dynasty Zhou, casting aside the time for which she had once served as empress. In the annals of history, she would forever remain the first and only female emperor of China. The price of power. To sit upon the dragon throne was to invite endless suspicion. Confucian scholars railed against her rule, denouncing it as a violation of natural law. Aristocratic clans plotted in whispers, resenting the dismantling of their privilege. Even within her family, loyalty was brittle, often poisoned by ambition and fear. Wu answered challenge with iron. Her reign is stained with accusations of bloodshed. Rivals executed, ministers exiled, princes forced to take their own lives. The stories are chilling. Limbs severed, bodies drowned in wine, enemies silenced in the dead of night. Whether truth or propaganda, they reveal how deeply her opponents feared her. One tale tells of her son, Li Xian, accused of treason and banished to the empire's farthest reaches. There, he was forced into suicide by poison, a mother sacrificing her bloodline to guard her throne. Another recounts the destruction of her enemies' tombs, their memory deliberately erased from stone. For the chroniclers of later dynasties, these tales confirmed their prejudice. Wu Zetian was a tyrant, a monster cloaked in imperial silk. But archaeology whispers another story. The prosperous empire. Beyond the chronicles of cruelty, the evidence of her reign reveals something far different. Under Wu Zetian, China flourished as never before. Tianjin and Luoyang became cosmopolitan marvels, cities where traders from Persia, India, and even Byzantium crowded the markets. The Silk Road pulsed with wealth, guarded by military outposts. Wu ordered deep into Central Asia. Precious stones, amber, ivory, and glass flowed into the empire, enriching its artisans and dazzling its palaces. The arts thrived. Crown jewels fashioned from distant lands have been unearthed, their craftsmanship blending East and West. Poets, musicians, and scholars found patronage, their voices filling the cultural golden age of the Tang. And for the common people, Wu's reforms mattered most. She expanded the imperial examination system, opening the path of governance to men of talent rather than just noble birth. She sponsored granaries to prevent famine, ensuring that in times of drought, the empire's people would not starve. She granted women greater freedoms, the right to own property, to remarry, to participate in business. Even female officials rose to prominence, including a female prime minister, Shangguan Waner, whose poetry still survives today. For all the bloodshed, there was also prosperity. For all the terror, there was order. The empress and the faith Wu Zetian understood that power needed more than soldiers and laws. It required belief. She turned to Buddhism, the rising faith of the age, as both shield and sword. She commissioned grand temples and pagodas, none more magnificent than the rebuilt giant Wild Goose Pagoda, soaring nearly 300 feet into the heavens. She sponsored thousands of Buddhist statues carved into the Longmen grottos. One colossal figure modeled, it is said, after her own face. To her subjects, these monuments proclaimed that Wu was no mere ruler, but a bodhisattva in human form, a divine protector of the Dharma. By entwining her image with religion, she legitimized what Confucian orthodoxy denied her, the right of a woman to rule. It was audacious, it was genius, and it worked. The shadow of ruthlessness. Yet shadows always followed her light. The same Confucian chroniclers who decried her rule also preserved stories of her manipulations, tales of poisonings, false accusations, and political purges. Even archaeology offers traces of ruthlessness. The epitaph of her great-granddaughter, Princess Yongtai, suggests she may have ordered the girl's death to prevent dangerous alliances. Wu Zetian, like the empires she commanded, was built on contradictions. Compassionate reforms stood beside merciless executions. Monumental temples rose upon foundations of whispered fear. She was, in truth, both tyrant and visionary. The blank stele. By the twilight of her reign, Wu Zetian had ruled for nearly half a century. Age and illness weighed heavily upon her. Rebellions stirred among the nobility. Conspiracies brewed within her court. She abdicated in 705, retreating into silence. That winter, the Dragon Empress died at the age of 80. Her final resting place lay in the Grand Mausoleum at Qianling, beside her husband, Emperor Gaozong. At its gate stands a stele, the monument inscribed with the deeds of every emperor of China. But Wu's stele is unique. It bears no words, no boast, no confession, only silence. Perhaps she wished to defy her enemies, denying them the satisfaction of writing her legacy. Perhaps she trusted that her deeds, good and ill, would speak louder than stone. Or perhaps she knew that no epitaph could ever contain the paradox of her life. The Dragon Throne remembered. Wu Zetian remains one of history's most enigmatic figures. To Confucian scholars, she was a calamity, a warning against women in power. To archaeologists, she was a reformer, a patron, a ruler who strengthened her empire. To storytellers, she is eternal, the woman who sat where no woman was meant to sit. The Dragon Throne, once forbidden, became hers. And in seizing it, Wu Zetian forced the world to confront an uncomfortable truth. Power has no gender. Part 4. The Legacy of Shadows. When Wu Zetian died in the winter of 705, the Dragon Throne returned to the Tang. The dynasty she had founded, the Zhou, was swept aside, its banners lowered, its name struck from the official histories. Yet the woman who had worn the crown of dragons could not so easily be erased. Her shadow lingered, vast, contradictory, and defiant. For half a century, she had ruled an empire that stretched from the Korean peninsula to the edge of Central Asia. She had commanded armies, rebuilt cities, reformed examinations, and opened new space for women within a rigidly patriarchal world. Yet she had also silenced opponents with ruthless efficiency, purging clans, crushing rivals, and even sacrificing her own kin. Her legacy is neither triumph nor tragedy. It is both. The erasure of a dynasty. The Tang, restored by her sons, wasted little time in dismantling Wu's legacy. Her dynasty of Zhou was declared illegitimate, a usurpation that had interrupted the mandate of heaven. Chroniclers of the court, overwhelmingly male and loyal to Confucian ideals, painted her reign in blood. She was called a demon bird, a serpent in silk. The records accused her of killing children, of poisoning kin, of seducing monks and sorcerers. For centuries, her story was told as a warning. What happens when a woman dares to sit on the dragon throne? But propaganda leaves traces of its own. The sheer venom with which she was condemned betrays the fear she inspired. If her reign were truly one of ruin, why spend generations ensuring her vilification? The answer is clear. Wu Zetian had proven that a woman could rule, and for many in her world, that was the deepest crime of all. The forgotten prosperity. Beneath the layers of slander, the prosperity of her rule could not be denied. Archaeologists today unearth evidence of a China at its golden height under her command. The Silk Road thrived. Traders from Persia, India, Arabia, and Byzantium poured into her cities, making Chang'an and Luoyang the most cosmopolitan capitals on earth. Foreign ambassadors knelt at her court, marveling at its wealth. The arts flourished. Buddhist grottos carved with intricate statues still bear her imprint. Pagodas soared above the cityscape. Poetry, music, and painting reached dazzling heights. The common people endured less hunger. Vast granaries she ordered protected China during years of drought. Relief policies showed a ruler attentive to her subjects' survival. Women gained rare freedoms. Property rights, remarriage, and even the appointment of female officials marked a radical departure from tradition. For a brief moment in history, the chains of patriarchy loosened. These truths were inconvenient for the Confucian establishment. To acknowledge them would be to admit that Wu Zetian had succeeded, and success was a threat greater than any failure. The weight of blood. Yet it would be false to cleanse her reign of its darkness. Wu Zetian was not a gentle reformer, but a strategist who wielded cruelty when necessary. Her rule was scarred by purges that thinned the ranks of powerful families. Her surveillance of rivals was relentless, her punishments merciless. Princess Yongtai, her own great-granddaughter, is said to have died after being forced to ingest poison, a victim of palace intrigues too dangerous to be allowed to survive. Hundreds of nobles met their end in exile, execution, or enforced silence. Wu understood a truth as old as empire itself. Power is purchased with blood, and to remain upon the dragon throne, she paid, and made others pay, in full. The blank stone, perhaps the most haunting symbol of her legacy, is the stele at Qianling. Every emperor of China carved their achievements into stone, leaving behind eternal testimony. Wu's stele stands empty. For more than 1,000 years, scholars have puzzled over its silence. Was it humility, defiance, or the ultimate statement of confidence, that no words could define her, no judgment contain her? The blank stele has become its own paradox, reflecting the woman it represents. For some, it is proof of her arrogance. For others, it is the final masterpiece of her reign, an invitation for history to speak and for debate to never end. Echoes through time. Centuries after her death, Wu Zetian's ghost still stirs unease. To feminist scholars, she is a pioneer, proof that women can wield power with brilliance equal to men. To her critics, she remains a symbol of ambition run amok, the dangers of overturning natural order. In modern China, she is remembered with both fascination and suspicion. Television dramas and novels retell her life with embellishment, casting her as heroine or villain depending on the teller. Tourists still walk the path to Qianling, staring at the mute stone that refuses to answer their questions. Even now, Wu Zetian cannot be reduced to a single image. She is the dragon and the shadow, the tyrant and the reformer, the curse and the miracle. The legacy of shadows. In the end, Wu Zetian's greatest legacy is not a dynasty or a monument, but a question. What does it mean when a woman defies a world built against her? Her reign brought prosperity, but at the cost of blood. It elevated women, but crushed her enemies. It expanded China's influence, but narrowed her family's survival. It was in every way a reign of contradictions, shadows entwined with light, and perhaps that is why she endures. For 13 centuries, Wu Zetian has remained more than a historical figure. She is a mirror, reflecting the fears and hopes of every age that remembers her. Her story is not just of a woman who seized a throne. It is of the shadows she cast. Shadows that still stretch across history, daring us to look closer. Her legacy is carved not in words, but in shadows. Blood and brilliance, cruelty and compassion, all entwined in a reign unlike any other. Yet the final chapter awaits, and the Silent Stele still whispers its mystery. Join us in the conclusion of Wu Zetian's story, and subscribe to Obscure Truths, where history's echoes are never silent. Part 5. The Silent Stele. At the gates of Qianling Mausoleum, the winds sweep over the hills. The tomb is vast, carved into the earth, guarded by stone sentinels that have stood for more than 1,000 years. And there at the threshold stands a monument unlike any other. A towering stele of polished stone, silent and bare. Every emperor of China carved their glory into stone. Lines of triumph, victories in battle, the mandate of heaven inscribed for eternity. But Wu Zetian's stele carries no words, no boasts, no accusations, no defense, only silence. It is perhaps the most haunting artifact in Chinese history, a blank page where the story of an empire should have been written. The enigma of silence. Why did she leave it empty? Scholars have debated for centuries. Some argue it was humility, a gesture of modesty at the end of a reign steeped in controversy. Others believe it was defiance, a final refusal to let her enemies shape her narrative. And still others see it as confidence, the quiet assurance that her deeds would echo louder than any inscription could. Whatever the reason, the silence has outlasted the noise. The chronicles written by Confucian historians, filled with venom and slander, have aged into dust and skepticism. But the blank stele remains, unbroken, undefeated by time. It is as though Wu Zetian carved not words, but a challenge. A question etched in emptiness. Who will judge me? The mirror of history. That question has echoed through 13 centuries. For some, Wu Zetian is a tyrant, the usurper who drowned her rivals in blood, who sacrificed her children, who ruled through fear. For others, she is a reformer, the ruler who brought prosperity, expanded opportunity, and reshaped China into a global power. Both are true. Both are incomplete. Wu Zetian was never meant to be simple. She was a mirror in which history sees itself. To patriarchal scholars, she reflected chaos and disorder. To the common people, she reflected justice and relief. To us today, she reflects ambition, power, and the eternal struggle between light and shadow. The dragon and the shadow. Her reign reminds us that power is never pure. It is forged in contradictions, in choices that cut both ways. Wu Zetian was ruthless, yet compassionate. She was a destroyer, yet a creator. She was a woman who claimed what the world told her she could never have, the dragon throne itself. That act alone ensured her immortality. For all the slander, for all the blood, for all the centuries of condemnation, Wu Zetian remains. Her story is told in whispered caution, in bold admiration, in endless retellings that refuse to let her fade. She is both the dragon and the shadow. And perhaps that is why she endures. The Silent Stele is testament. The stele without words is not emptiness, it is fullness beyond inscription. It forces us to confront the truth that no single story, no single perspective, no single inscription can contain a life so vast. It leaves space for every generation to write their own judgment, to grapple with the paradox of a woman who ruled an empire in defiance of her age. In that sense, Wu Zetian wrote more than any emperor ever did. She wrote not on stone, but on time itself. The final reflection. As the wind whistles over Qianling, as the sun casts its shadow on the Silent Stele, one cannot help but wonder, what is legacy? Is it the words carved in stone, the lines etched for eternity? Or is it the silence that compels us to remember, to question, to debate, to never let the memory die? Wu Zetian chose silence, and in doing so she ensured that her story would never be finished, that every age, every voice, every scholar, and every dreamer would return to that blank stone and ask again, who was she? Epilogue, the call of obscure truths. Wu Zetian's life is not a tale of good or evil, but of power itself. Raw, unyielding, contradictory. She was both monster and visionary, tyrant and pioneer. She cannot be captured in a single judgment, just as her stele cannot be carved with a single truth. And perhaps that is the lesson she left us. History is not only what is written, it is also what is left unsaid. Wu Zetian remains, not as a line in a chronicle, but as a question echoing through the ages. A question we cannot ignore. Thus ends the tale of the Dragon Empress. But the silence of her stele still calls, daring us to seek, to question, to uncover the obscure truths hidden in history.